There is a quiet kind of power that some women carry. A power that doesn't shout, doesn't beg, and doesn't chase. It's the kind of presence that makes men notice her without her saying a word. Carl Jung would tell you, this is not an accident. It is the natural outcome of a woman who has traveled deep into herself, faced her own shadows, and emerged whole. Emotional maturity in a woman is magnetic in a way beauty alone can never be. It's not about perfect hair or flawless skin. It's about an energy that says, I know who I am, and I'm not afraid to be her. Men feel this energy before they even understand it. It's why they can't explain why they think about her at night or why her absence feels louder than anyone else's presence. A woman like this does not play games, but she understands the rules of human nature. She doesn't demand love. She invites it. She doesn't audition for someone's affection. She allows them to prove they deserve hers. And here's the paradox: the less she chases, the more love comes to her. Jung believed that this happens because she has withdrawn her projections. She no longer sees a man as the missing piece of her puzzle. She is her own puzzle, complete and beautiful. Men feel safe around her, but they also feel challenged. She sees through their masks without judgment, and this makes them want to be the kind of man who could stand beside her. She doesn't attract through manipulation. She attracts through authenticity. Her boundaries are not walls. They are doors that open only for those who know how to knock. There is a quiet revolution that happens inside a woman when she reaches emotional maturity. It's not the kind of revolution that shouts from rooftops or tries to prove anything to anyone. It's an internal shift, subtle on the outside, but seismic within. It changes the way she walks into a room, the way she listens, the way she speaks, and even the way she sits in silence. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. An emotionally mature woman has paid the price for that privilege. She has been through disappointments, heartbreaks, and illusions that once made her believe love was something she had to earn by being more beautiful, more accommodating, more enough. She has faced moments where she poured herself into people who gave her only drops in return. And through it all, she discovered something that freed her. Love is not something to bargain for. It's something to allow. When a woman reaches this state, she no longer sends out desperate energy. She is no longer trying to fix, save, or convince anyone to choose her. And paradoxically, this is when people start choosing her without hesitation. Men sense a difference they can't articulate. It's not about arrogance. It's about an energy of self-containment. She is whole before you meet her. She is not fishing for compliments or chasing validation. And because of that, her approval feels rare and valuable. You see, Jung believed that relationships are mirrors. We project onto others the parts of ourselves we haven't fully owned. An immature woman may project her need for security, her fear of abandonment, or her longing for validation onto a man, hoping he will fill those spaces. But the emotionally mature woman has already sat with her own emptiness. She has learned to mother her inner child, to be her own protector, to soothe her own fears. This means she doesn't need a man to complete her. She desires one to complement her. And that difference is felt immediately. When she listens to a man, she is truly present. Not because she is trying to trap him in a web of attention, but because she is curious about his soul. She isn't in a hurry to show him her best side, because she knows all her sides have value. She has made peace with her imperfections, and this peace radiates outwards, telling others, you don't have to perform here. You can just be. Love comes to her because she does not clutch at it. She understands that desperation pushes love away the way a clenched fist cannot hold water. Instead, she holds relationships with an open palm, allowing people to stay because they want to, not because they are trapped. Men are drawn to this freedom because deep down, every human being craves the safety of being loved without condition. But make no mistake, emotional maturity does not mean she tolerates disrespect. In fact, her boundaries are sharper than ever. She no longer fears losing someone who cannot treat her with care. She has learned that the pain of walking away is nothing compared to the pain of abandoning herself. A man quickly realizes that her attention is not a guarantee. It is earned through consistency, respect, and emotional integrity. And this is where Jung's concept of the anima comes in, the inner feminine energy within men. When a man meets a woman of this depth, it awakens something inside him, making him want to rise to meet her in that same depth. She does not attract by being easier or less complicated. She attracts because she is rich in complexity yet rooted in simplicity. She can sit across from a man in comfortable silence without feeling the need to fill the air with words. She can walk away from someone she loves if they repeatedly choose chaos over peace. She can love without losing herself because she has already learned the cost of doing so. The irony is that she no longer needs the chase, but she still inspires it. She no longer tries to be unforgettable, yet she is. A man might walk away from her, but he will remember her for years, because she wasn't just a romantic interest. She was an experience of truth, and truth is rare. This is why she can step into a cafe, a meeting, or a social gathering, and love will quietly notice her from across the room. She is not scanning for attention, but her very stillness pulls eyes toward her. Her smile is not a performance. It is an honest moment of joy. And when she speaks, her words have weight, because she has no need to speak, just to fill silence. Carl Jung might have called her an individuated woman, someone who has integrated her shadow, embraced her light, and stands firmly in both. She doesn't reject her past. She has made peace with it. She doesn't fear her emotions. She listens to them. She doesn't hide her vulnerabilities. She chooses when and with whom to share them. Men often describe her as mysterious, but the truth is she is simply clear. Clear in her intentions, clear in her values, and clear in her boundaries. In a world full of noise, clarity feels like mystery. She does not need to post endless reminders of her worth online. She lives it quietly in the way she treats herself. She invests in her health, her passions, her friendships, and her dreams, not because it will make her more dateable, but because it will make her more alive. And aliveness is the most attractive quality in any human being. Her emotional maturity shows in how she handles conflict. She doesn't explode to prove a point or sulk to manipulate a response. She addresses issues with honesty and grace, then lets go of what she cannot control. She knows that holding on to grudges is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. And perhaps the most magnetic quality she has is her ability to walk away with love still in her heart. She does not destroy someone to justify her leaving. She simply accepts that not everyone is meant to stay, and that endings can be as sacred as beginnings. This is why love finds her without her asking. She has become the embodiment of what she seeks: respect, peace, honesty, and depth. She no longer waits for someone to give her the life she wants. She creates it. She no longer hopes someone will see her worth. She sees it herself, and others are simply catching up. In the end, she is proof of what Jung understood so well: that when you stop chasing what you think you need, you create space for what you truly deserve. Love, for her, is not a prize. It is a natural consequence of being whole. And that, my friends, is why she never has to ask for it. There's a woman I once knew, let's call her Alina. She wasn't the loudest person in the room. In fact, she had a way of fading into the background if she wanted to. But somehow, even in her quietness, you noticed her. Not because she was dressed in a way that screamed for attention, but because there was a certain stillness about her. A self-possession. Men seemed to orbit her without her trying. She didn't flirt excessively, she didn't make every conversation about herself, and she certainly didn't compete for anyone's approval. And yet, she was never alone. When you spoke to her, she looked right at you, like you were the only person that mattered in that moment. She wasn't pretending to listen. She was actually there, fully present. Carl Jung would say that presence like that comes from integration. A person who has reconciled with their inner contradictions doesn't have to split their attention between being here and worrying about being liked. They are simply here, and that is magnetic in a world where most people are halfway somewhere else. Elena once told me she hadn't always been this way. In her 20s, she chased love hard. She thought if she could just be perfect, enough, no one would leave. She bent over backwards to please. She took every unanswered text personally. She stayed in relationships long after they stopped being healthy because she thought walking away would mean she had failed. She lived in fear of being forgotten. But then something happened. A long relationship ended, not in betrayal, but in quiet disconnection. She had given her everything, and it still wasn't enough to make him stay. For months, she felt empty. She tried to distract herself, date again, fill her calendar with social events, but something inside kept whispering, "You are missing the point." And the point was this: she had been outsourcing her sense of worth to someone else. She thought love was proof of value, so she stopped. Stopped chasing, stopped pretending, stopped trying to fill the space. Instead, she sat with the discomfort of her own company. It wasn't easy. At first, the silence felt unbearable, but slowly, that silence became her friend. She learned to read alone in cafes without feeling awkward. She learned to cook for herself, as if she were cooking for someone special. She started exercising not to be attractive, but to feel alive in her body. She pursued hobbies she'd abandoned. And with each small act, she began to feel whole again. This is the transformation that Jung might call individuation. The process of becoming your true self, by integrating both your strengths and your shadows. She stopped pretending she wasn't afraid of rejection, and instead, she learned to face that fear. She stopped denying her own needs, and instead, she honored them. The more she accepted herself, the less she needed others to validate her. Months later, she began to notice something strange. She wasn't chasing anyone, but people were noticing her more. Conversations lingered. Men she barely knew remembered small details she'd shared. Old flames reached out. Even strangers treated her differently, with more respect, more warmth. It wasn't magic, it was the shift in her energy. Here's the thing about emotional maturity. It communicates without words. A woman who is at peace with herself radiates a subtle confidence that says, "I am enough as I am." And people can feel it. You can't fake it. You can post all the self-love quotes you want, but if deep down you are begging for attention, people will sense it. And if deep down you are steady and self-possessed, they will sense that too. This doesn't mean emotionally mature women never fall in love or never feel vulnerable. On the contrary, they feel deeply. But they have learned that feelings are not dictators. They don't have to obey every urge to text, to prove, to demand. They allow space in love. They understand that attraction grows in the soil of respect, not desperation. A man once told me about a woman he met at a friend's dinner party. She barely spoke to him, but she smiled once, just once, in a way that felt genuine, not rehearsed. He said he thought about that smile for weeks, not because it was seductive, but because it felt like it belonged to her, not to him. She wasn't offering it to get a reaction, she was simply expressing joy in the moment. And that, to him, was irresistible. Carl Jung believed that much of attraction is unconscious. We are drawn to people who carry qualities we either admire, desire, or need to integrate within ourselves. A man who meets an emotionally mature woman often finds himself drawn not just to her beauty, but to the calm she carries. If he is restless, her steadiness soothes him. If he is scattered, her presence focuses him. If he is uncertain, her clarity inspires him. She becomes a mirror to the part of himself that wants to grow. But here's the thing. She doesn't need him to change. She doesn't see him as a project. She lets him be who he is, and that freedom is intoxicating. It's rare in a world where so many love with conditions. Emotional maturity also changes the way a woman handles loss. If a man chooses to leave, she doesn't crumble into pieces. She may feel pain. She is human, after all. But she knows that his choice says more about him than about her worth. She has lived enough life to understand that some people are chapters, not the whole story. The younger version of her might have begged, bargained, or tried to become whatever he wanted. But now, she simply closes the door with grace, knowing that space left behind is not a void. It's an invitation for something better aligned. Men find themselves thinking about her long after she's gone, because she left without bitterness. She didn't scorch the earth behind her. She simply walked away with dignity, and dignity is unforgettable. Jung would say she has integrated her anima, her inner feminine, in a way that allows her to hold both softness and strength. She can be nurturing without being a doormat, vulnerable without being unsafe, independent without being closed off. This balance makes her presence rare. When she loves freely. Not because she fears losing someone, but because she knows love is meant to be given without keeping score. And yet, she doesn't tolerate being taken for granted. She knows that love without mutual respect is just dependency wearing a mask. She attracts love without asking for it, because she has become love in human form. Not romantic love alone, but the love of life, of self, of truth. She walks through the world as if she belongs in it, and she does. Her life is not on pause, waiting for someone to press play. She is already living, and that aliveness draws people like a flame draws moths. The irony is that she no longer cares about being chosen, and yet she is chosen over and over. Not because she plays hard to get, but because she is hard to forget. And that is the final paradox Jung might appreciate. When you no longer need love to complete you, you attract the kind of love that does. I want you to imagine her now. Not on a stage, not in a spotlight, just walking through an ordinary street, maybe with a coffee in her hand, sunlight brushing her face. She isn't dressed to impress anyone. She isn't scanning the crowd for familiar faces. She isn't wondering who might be watching. She is simply present, breathing in the air, feeling the ground under her feet, moving at her own pace. From across the street, someone notices her. They can't explain why. There are people dressed more fashionably, people louder, people more conventionally. Why? Catching. But she holds their attention because she isn't trying to. This is the quiet power of an emotionally mature woman. She has become the kind of person who doesn't have to convince the world she is valuable. She knows it, and knowing it allows her to live in a state of effortless magnetism. Carl Jung believed that the moment you stop chasing, life begins to meet you halfway. The more you force love, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you stand still in your truth, the right things and the right people begin to find you. That is the paradox she embodies. She is not cold. She is not detached. She simply understands that love offered freely is the only love worth keeping. She doesn't measure her worth by how much attention she receives, but by how deeply she honors herself. A man who loves her knows she will never be his possession. She will be his partner. He knows he can't buy her loyalty with empty promises, because her loyalty is already with herself. And from that place, she can give it to someone else without resentment. And if love ends, she will not collapse into nothingness. She will grieve, yes. She will cry in her kitchen. She will lie awake at night with a hollow ache in her chest. But she will rise. She will rise because she has risen before. And each time she does, she becomes more herself. This is the kind of woman who doesn't just attract love, she attracts the right kind of love. The kind that grows, the kind that nourishes, the kind that respects the soil it grows in. She has no interest in shallow waters. She would rather be alone in her depth than surrounded by people who fear it. And here's the truth that many miss. Love that lasts is never about constant fireworks. It is about a steady flame, tended carefully, protected from the wind, burning bright through the years. She knows this. She doesn't mistake chaos for passion or instability for excitement. She chooses peace, and in choosing peace, she becomes peace. That's why she never has to beg for love. She never has to demand it. She simply is, and love recognizes her when it sees her. One day, maybe years from now, a man who once knew her will think about her again. Not because she did anything to stay in his mind, but because she showed him a version of love and presence he couldn't forget. A love rooted in self-respect. A presence that didn't waver when tested. He may smile at the memory. He may even regret, but she won't know, and she won't need to. Her life will still be full. Her heart will still be open, and she will still be walking, coffee in hand, sunlight on her face, attracting love without asking for it. Because that is who she has become. Eichel depth so it feels even more grounded in his philosophy while keeping the poetic flow. That would make it feel like both a lecture and a love letter. Would you like me to do that? Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That is where her journey began, not in finding love, but in finding herself. Emotional maturity is not something she stumbled upon by accident. It was carved into her through the work of facing her own reflection without flinching. Most people look into the mirror and only see what they want to see, or worse, only what they fear. But she made a decision to look at all of it. The light, the shadow, the contradictions, the parts of herself she once tried to hide. And in doing so, she learned one of life's great paradoxes. The very flaws she once thought would make her unlovable were the same ones that made her human, real, and magnetic. Jung spoke often about the shadow, those aspects of ourselves we reject, repress, or deny. For many women, the shadow contains the emotions they were told were too much: anger, ambition, desire, even boundaries. But she stopped burying them. She welcomed them home. She realized that owning her anger didn't make her unkind. It made her honest. Owning her ambition didn't make her unfeminine. It made her alive. Owning her desire didn't make her unworthy. It made her whole. And wholeness is what people are drawn to. Not the performance of perfection, but the authenticity of a soul that has stopped running from itself. She no longer projects her shadow onto others, expecting them to carry the parts she refuses to see. Jung warned that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. She took that to heart. Instead of blaming every disappointment on someone else, she turned inward. What was this reaction teaching her? What fear did this trigger expose? What wound was she still protecting? This is why she no longer enters relationships with the subconscious hope that someone else will heal her. She has already sat in the fire of her own healing. She has already walked through the darkness of her own making. She does not need a rescuer, because she has become her own. This is also why she is not easily impressed by surface charm. She has lived long enough to see that words without integrity are just decoration. She does not fall for grand gestures if they are not supported by quiet consistency. And this makes her rare, because in a world obsessed with appearances, she chooses substance. Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." She lives by that. She expects it from others. And without saying a word, this standard communicates itself to anyone who comes near her. A man who meets her knows, sometimes without fully realizing why, that she is not the kind of woman who will tolerate half love, half truths, or half effort. And yet, she is not hard. She is not cold. Her boundaries are not made of steel, but of wisdom. They are flexible enough to let love in, but strong enough to keep harm out. When she loves, it is not to complete herself, but to expand herself. She does not enter relationships from a place of lack, hoping to be filled, but from a place of abundance, hoping to share. And because she is not afraid to be alone, she can love without fear. This is why love gravitates toward her. She is not chasing it down dark streets, begging it to stay. She is standing in the light, knowing it will arrive in its own time. Jung might call this the alignment of the inner and outer worlds. Her inner self is not at war, so her outer life does not feel like a battlefield. And here's the secret: men who meet her feel something unusual. Safety and challenge at the same time. Safety because she is steady, genuine, and trustworthy. Challenge because her very presence calls them to rise. She will never demand they grow, but they will want to. That is the power of a woman who has grown herself. Love without asking is not magic. It is the natural result of living in truth. It is the consequence of doing the work others avoid. The work of self-confrontation, self-acceptance, and self-respect. She did not get here by luck. She got here by choosing herself again and again, even when it was hard, even when it was lonely, even when it meant starting over. And now, she can walk into any room and know, without arrogance, without fear, that love will find her when it's ready, because she is ready. This is what Jung would have understood so well. When you integrate your whole self, you no longer have to beg the world to give you what you already are. If you want, I can now add one last 5-minute slow burn ending, almost like the camera fades to black while her presence still lingers, to give this speech that unforgettable, cinematic closing people replay in their minds. Would you like me to? Picture her again, years from now. She's older now, not in the way the world fears age, but in the way a tree grows rings inside its trunk. Each ring tells a story. Stories of love found and love lost. Stories of nights she thought she would break and mornings she realized she hadn't. Stories of choices that cost her comfort but gave her peace. She's sitting at a small table by a window. It's raining outside, the kind of soft rain that makes the whole world slow down. She's reading a book, sipping tea, not waiting for anyone, not expecting anything. And yet, if you were to look at her in that moment, you'd see it. That quiet radiance, that still magnetism, that rare presence. She doesn't need the room to turn when she walks in. She doesn't need applause, likes, or confirmation. She doesn't need to be told she's beautiful to believe she is. She knows. And that knowing is the flame that draws people in without burning herself out. Jung would tell you that what you see in her is not an accident. It is the result of 1,000 tiny decisions to stay true to herself, to not betray her own soul for the sake of keeping someone else, to honor the voice inside her, even when it whispered against the noise of the world. She has faced rejection without collapsing. She has walked away from what did not serve her without bitterness. She has chosen patience over desperation, and each of those moments was a thread woven into the fabric of who she is now. And so love finds her, not the frantic kind, not the conditional kind, but the kind that recognizes her depth and bows to it. The kind that doesn't try to tame her, because it understands that her freedom is part of her beauty. She will never beg for love, not because she's proud, but because she knows that love offered unwillingly is not love at all. She will never plead to be seen, because she sees herself clearly now. One day, long after this moment, someone will sit across from her, maybe a partner, maybe a friend, maybe a stranger, and they will feel it, that rare, unshakable stillness. They will sense the strength of someone who has walked through fire and come out not harder, but softer, more open, more alive. And they will think to themselves, This is what I've been looking for. But she will smile gently, maybe change the subject, because she knows something most people don't. She was never waiting to be found. She was always here. And that, in the end, is why love always finds her. If you want, I can now take the entire speech and smooth it into one seamless, 18 character final draft that reads like a single breath, perfect for recording in one take. That way, it won't feel like separate parts stitched together, but like one long, hypnotic flow. Would you like me to prepare that?